Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is produced by the POC Way and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative. This episode is sponsored by AmTrust Warranty and Specialty Risk, a provider of line-of-duty death loan protection through many of our POC institutions. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I may have the most special guests I've ever had on Public Safety Talk Radio. You know, you may see over 100 episodes, many times you see me with this cup. Go ahead and pick up your cup, Vicki. That's where I got this cup, from the great organization of How to Love Our Cops. And I have their CEO and founder, Vicki Newman. I literally can go on and on about all the great books that she's written, the great work that she's done with law enforcement spouses. But rather than take up a half an hour on her awesome resume, let's just get her on the show. Vicki, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
It's my pleasure. I think we've been trying to get you on this show for, months, maybe even years now. And it's like, oh, I'm busy this day. Oh, I'm busy that day. You just go all over the place doing good things, don't you?
Yes, just my husband and I both. So I've got what I do and he's got what he does. And so we travel together. So it seems like I'm gone about every other week.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're going to, some really, exotic places like, Terre Haute, Indiana, and Lincoln, Nebraska.
Let's see. We were in Nebraska last year. Yes.
There you go. Nebraska, actually. I like Nebraska. I don't know if I necessarily want to live there.
I did too.
Yeah, it's a great place to visit. So, but I guess when you're in Sacramento, you're right there by the airport. You can go just about anywhere. But let's get to How to Love Our Cops. You're a spouse of a retired state highway patrol officer who has a very, in my opinion, decorated and proud career. You went through, a lot of these trials and tribulations. Nobody can talk better about being a law enforcement spouse. Let's get into the How to Love Our Cops. What was the driving force to create this organization for law enforcement spouses?
Well, I couldn't do what I was doing alone anymore. That's why How to Love Our Cops exists. I had written A Chip on My Shoulder back in 2010 and was going, it really struck a chord with families. And so I started traveling around and talking about being married to a cop. And then 2016 hit, and there was just a lot since 2014 through 2016. There's just a lot of things going on in the law enforcement community nationally. And then my husband had some things with his career, and it got hard. It got really hard for me to do what I was doing by myself all the time. And so that's why How to Love Our Cops was born, is I could just not do this anymore by myself. And so I grabbed some other spouses that I knew and who were amazing, had great stories. And we banded together and did all the paperwork and all that stuff. And then the campfire hit the day before our first fundraiser, and we were off and running because we were definitely a part of the campfire that kind of kicked us off. That's the campfire in Paradise, California.
Yeah.
My husband was co-commander of that. And so we were just inundated right there from the beginning. So yeah, that's how it came to be.
Yeah, I know well about the campfire living here in California, although it was hundreds and hundreds of miles away from me, and saw, the news reports, even saw a documentary on that and how horrible that was. Even firefighters that worked on that talked about how horrible it was in comparison to others. So can't even imagine what it was like for Brent to deal with that.
Yeah, he did 16 days so we're in Sacramento, Paradise and Chico. That's actually where I was raised. Mm-hmm. And it's about 2 hours from here. And so he was driving up back and forth for 16 days, and he'd come home and he'd smell like smoke. And so basically I'd throw his uniforms in the washer. I'd set my alarm for the middle of the night to put him in the dryer. So the first thing in the morning, he's leaving very early to get back up there after just a few hours of sleep. And so that went on for 16 days nonstop. And then, he's still going up there, but not as, not as much. So.
Yeah. At what point in the middle of the night did you iron? So in case he was on TV
Well, luckily he was in utilities, so I didn't have to iron.
Yeah. Just making a little levity. It would say obviously a very heavy story.
Yes.
So let's go back to How to Love Our Cops. In full disclosure, I've known Vicki for years, and we've had many side conversations, so I certainly know some answers to this. But bluntly, nobody is more experienced and veteran than you at being in a law enforcement relationship and raising a family and going through all those. What are some of the most important things that a law enforcement spouse needs to really understand and embrace in the role that he or she has?
Oh, goodness. The role is so important because I look at it as those of us who love a cop, we're the backup at home. And, they have backup on duty, but this career really has a lot of challenges that come with it. It's not just the risk. It's not just the shift work. It's not just, the hatred that comes towards our cops these days. It's not just that. It's about having, being the person at home who is supportive and who's also protective, not just supportive, but protective, meaning, and a lot of gals and guys don't see this as their role, which we're trying to change because, it's like, well, he's got his thing and I've got mine. So, but really the way that my husband and I have looked at this is, we coined the term one team, one fight. And so going through life of being on each other's team, a lot of times we're not on each other's team and we're fighting, especially when it comes to the police career because of, logistical things. And it seems like always the spouse is the one who has to kind of take up the slack. And there's, sometimes that's just not fair because, we're not cops. We didn't sign up for this, but yet we love a cop. And so
you kind of did.
Yeah. So, and that part doesn't seem fair, but it's a huge and important role to be that backup and to watch and to, see when things are not right with our officers, if they're not getting enough sleep or if they're just, they've seen something that is really hard on them and is affecting them, or maybe their shit bucket is full, where they've seen so many things and it just keeps adding and adding and adding and adding. And then all of a sudden there's anger and frustration and sleeplessness and maybe even nightmares and those kinds of things. So the role, as far as spouses are concerned, you're the first responder. You're the first person, the early warning system. And we are compasses. We know when our officers are in a good spot or not. But a lot of times spouses don't have any clue what to do, or if it's normal, or if this is, I'm going to include myself in this because I know more now than I did, all those years. And so many things that I know now could have really helped a lot of the difficulties that my husband and I had. So it could have really helped. But anyway, so we're trying as How to Love Our Cops to educate and equip those who love their cops to, be good backup, be good partners, be good lovers, be good, friends. So.
Yeah. This may help a little bit for people that are watching or listening that are spouses of not just police officers, but people that have high stress jobs, and I certainly don't compare my wife who's in healthcare to, somebody who's, driving around in a police car or working in an emergency room per se. She doesn't do that. But, I realize, and didn't realize this so much in my first marriage, but, you learn, you try not to make the same mistakes twice. And I realize and embrace the fact that, her job is much more stressful than mine. Yeah, I get busy and yeah, there's things that need to be done, but there are constantly quadrant 1 things being thrown at her for 12 hours a day of, this needs to be done. Some of it actually is, life and death. Some of it is, a little less critical than that, but she's constantly being bombarded from different situations. And so, I embrace the idea myself that I'm going to create as much of a drama-free haven here at the house that we can, that I can. She comes home, I say, you want a drink? You need some time, whatever it is. And usually, there's, music on, I'm working, she comes home and there's nothing, that's really an obstacle or a problem when she gets home. And, I find like 5 to 10 minutes in, she's kind of, decompressed. And then we can have our dinner and relax and watch TV and so forth. And, I think back to my first marriage, 20, 30 years ago. I know I look younger than that, but, thank you for laughing at that stupid joke. Yeah, I think, where, I would harp on something that really wasn't that important to begin with. And that doesn't mean, and I'll get to a question here or your opinion, that doesn't mean necessarily that I'm going to be walked over either. 95% of the time, I just say, all right, you did this or said that, it's not important. Let's let it slide. But if it really is, starting to push the boundary, which we had a few weeks ago. She had a really rough day and we had, a nice drama-free evening. And then she's just started going on about something that was inconsequential. And I said, all right, time out here. Let's not go there. All right. Because this is, I did something nice and now you're getting pissed. And, that's just not going to happen. So, my point is that, I think that one of the things that probably law enforcement spouses need to understand is, yes, let's create this haven and this one team type of mentality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be less than. That, no. We need to be rolled over. There is a point there, and there's kind of an art and a science to that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there have been spouses that basically disagree with me because they're like, I'm not a doormat. He needs to take care of himself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, everything's about him. No, it is about us. And the thing that I think as we mature or get older, that we realize is that who you are affects me and who I am affects you. And we're in this life together. And so when we're intentional with each other, not that it's all about the police officer or everything revolves around him. No, not at all. Because a lot of spouses, police officers don't make that much. So a lot of us work. And so, and it does seem like, the spouse is the one who kind of takes on I'll take off today with our kid who's sick, rather than you going out. And but it's all about working together. And that's and the intentionality needs to be on both sides, and the communication on both sides. One of the strongest things that I've ever seen is a spouse who needs to speak her piece or his piece and just say, look, you're going down a wrong road, and I don't know what's going on, but this can't be. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about me. I'm worried about our kids. And that's a very, very difficult conversation to have. It requires great strength. And so no, I'm not talking about being a doormat. I'm talking about talking and speaking your piece, and also knowing when to speak your piece. Sometimes just as they're going outside, on their shift, it's not the best time. But that's just wisdom. That's not, putting myself underneath or as a doormat type of mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. What I, in that analogy or actual true story that I mentioned, I kind of just put a wall there and said, all right, we're not going to talk about this. And then like 2 days later, when she was in a good mood, I made a joke about it, and we both laughed because she got it. Yeah. Now, at the time, if I said, hey, you're out of line, you're becoming the problem, then it blows up into something that you don't need. 2 days later, you could say, you could get a little, slight dig, and then they get it. They're like, all right, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Humor is a great way to come at, conflict, conflict resolution, because a lot of times we're really capitalizing on something that's actually relatively minor. And just because we've had a crappy day, things are, elevated, especially at night before you get sleep. A lot of times by the morning, it's like, you know what, I don't even really care. I mean, why did I make such a big deal about this last night? But yeah, I mean, that's, sleep is very important.
Yeah.
And to our mental health and our relational health as well. I know Brent and I will fight that night, and he would say, let's talk about this in the morning. And, and we would, and it would be so much better after a good night's sleep. So.
Yeah. Much different conversation because you're at different emotional levels at that time. But to have kind of a segue from the humor, one of my wife, I have this running joke with my wife and a few other people because, I'm not a cop, but I work with a lot of law enforcement and organizations that do. And she's not a nurse or a doctor, but works with a bunch of nurses in her line of work. And, she'll tell me about, a nurse colleague, and she'll say, guess what? She's married to a cop. Or I'll be talking to a police officer, and they'll say, yeah, my wife is an EMT or a nurse. And we joke and say, yeah, that never happens. And it seems I had this conversation even in the same joking manner with a gentleman named Chris Luttrell, who does a great podcast, 2 Feet on the Ground podcast, about, he's an officer. I says, you see, some of these first responders gravitate to people with similar public safety type professions. And as he said, that's great because you understand and you got this, you got the same, quadrant one, in my words, not his, activity going in your brain, and it's exciting. But, it also creates some of this, in terms of, to the point that we were just saying, if an officer comes home and is in a bad mood and you have an emergency room nurse coming home too, it's like, I ain't going to be taking any credit. You know what I saw today? So do you see that, these spouses that are also in a similar high stress life and death job, and what that can do to a marriage and how to work that out so it doesn't end up in divorce in 17 and a half months after they say I do?
Well, my son-in-law, my daughter is a nurse practitioner, and
Mhm.
she is married to a cop, believe that or not. But
Oh,
having
well,
started
really?
this
That
whole
never
thing,
happens.
oh, never happens. No, it seriously. But I think, yes, there can be conflict in that, but I think there's also a lot of empathy for each other, and just the stuff that they're seeing. There's a greater understanding. If you've got a gal who is young and dealing with kids all day, at home mom or homeschooling, or working from the home in doing things that are not life and death. um when an officer comes home, it's just there's such a stark difference. But when you have two people who are really working in high stress situations, and you have um you know both of you have a short give a
Mhm.
shit stick, that
That's a
where
good line.
it's
You should
like,
copyright that. Or
it
just
wasn't
steal that
mine,
from
it was
somebody
borrowed.
else. Yeah.
I did i did but it's just, there's a camaraderie there of understanding people, and a lot of times people who are not like us, and what you're dealing with, and drugs, and seeing a lot of the things that most people, especially the gal who is working with kids at home, you just don't see, and therefore don't understand fully. And so I think that is probably why a lot of times cops will look at nurses and marry them, is because there is that mutual understanding.
Hmm.
Or other cops, or I know we had dinner with a woman cop who was married to a fireman. So I mean, you know there's so many similarities, and it actually works. It actually works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. To segue to, yeah, a much more serious and tougher question. I'm not naive to the fact that, when you're in a law enforcement profession, there's alcoholism, there's PTSD, there's drugs, there's infidelity, there's all kinds of things that happen. Not that that doesn't happen in other marriages and relationships, but unfortunately more so in many first responder professions there. To those folks that might be watching or listening, especially those spouses where we're not quite at the point where of no return, where we've got to split this for the kids or for my own mental health, but we're getting pretty close to that. Yeah, for those folks that are really in that rough spot, any advice or recommendations on, maybe if you try this approach, this thing can still be saved.
Well, I think first, defining the problem. Is this job related? Is this that we're not communicating? Is this, why are you drinking? Um, what are the issues? And then, because you can't really work on something until you know what is wrong.
Yeah.
And is this an outward thing, or is this between you and me? Is this because I was a victim of a crime, when I was little? And, we call them ACEs. I don't even know what that's, adverse childhood experience or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, which many cops have, because,
Mm-hmm.
that's where they want to make a difference. And a lot of times it's because they have been a victim in their past. And so, is that, complicating things? What is the issue here? Do we have post-traumatic stress that has become a disorder, or are there injuries from the job? You have to define what is the problem. And that may need you may need somebody to help you with that,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a mentor couple or a therapist or a life coach or a marriage coach. That is the first thing. You've got to define that problem. And then when you figure out, okay, what is it here? What, is it our communication? Is it that I don't understand the job and I'm just pissed off because I'm doing everything for you? Is it that we're not being intentional? I heard a guy who speaks a lot on marriage. He's our marriage pastor at our church. He basically said, what is the number one cause for divorce? And everybody's talking about, oh yeah, it's infidelity. Oh yeah, it's drinking. Oh yeah, it's this. He said it is complacency, a lack of intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we just, if we're, we get into a rut in our relationships and we just, are looking for some excitement, and we don't think that because our relationship has become mediocre or lack of vibrancy, a lot of times people will say, well, that's not floating my boat anymore, so I'm going to look for something else that's going to give me that shot of
adrenaline or excitement
or just make me feel, or she doesn't make me feel like I'm a man as much, or maybe they're in the kid phase and they're not having sex right now. I mean, it's like, or maybe there's an issue with the sex, right? I mean, so defining that issue and then finding the help and the resources that you have. If it's COP related, there are lots and lots and lots of resources. And How to Love Our Cops, we're always looking for more resources for people because it's epidemic.
Yeah.
So we need lots of options for our families, but really looking at, okay, can this be saved? It usually takes some time. And I will say that also, that when there's a problem in a marriage, John Gottman, I think he says that we're usually 7 years too late. We don't really deal with the problems in our marriages, and we're not intentional about spending time together. And then they're in his office, as a therapist, a marriage therapist, 7 years too late. And instead of coming to, so the problems are so great and people are so tired and they're so done that they don't even want to, they don't even want to deal with it. And so, unfortunately, people wait way too long, and before they do anything. And so, but yeah, I would say define the problem, be intentional now about putting some good stuff in your relationship rather than always dealing with the crap.
Yeah.
And then make those changes necessary together. That one team, one fight piece.
Yeah. I really like the intentional approach. I think sometimes, and didn't do this very well in my first marriage, doing it a hell of a lot better in my second one, thank the good Lord. Yay. Yeah.
So winning.
You can learn. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Our whole my line is I stole from Backdraft, is you go, we go. When anything there's really tough, there's something tough that needs to be done. I think I said that like a half a dozen times after her dad died and we had to take care of her mom, and she'd be like, I'll just go and do this. Like, no, you go, we go. So let's forget that. Let's figure out how to do it. But I think I see this, on a much smaller scale in business, but I think it applies to relationships too, is stepping back and asking the why. It's like, okay, this is somebody's being cantankerous or an alcoholic or doing drugs, whatever it is. Yeah. And in the relationship, you see how it's affecting you, and that's anger. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have a right to be angry, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problem when you take that step back and ask why. Well, why is he drinking until 3 a.m. in the dark, listening to music, what's the why behind it? And
Yes.
I think sometimes it may seem simple, but asking yourself that question, and then possibly of your partner or, with somebody else, that begins to peel back the onion a little bit, and it's been proven, it's a little story, and then I want to get back to how to love our cops. Is I read an interesting article about change, and it was about business, but they talked about it from an example of helping people to quit smoking. Some people that have smoked for several years and said, I can't stop, I can't stop, I can't stop. But there was one particular doctor that had a high record of success in getting people stopped to quit smoking. And one of the first things they did is when they got them in a room, they'd say, all right, you got your favorite pack of cigarettes, take it out, light up. And and they're like, I'm here to quit smoking. What am I doing? You're telling me to line up? What am I paying for here, Doc?
Yeah. What?
Yeah. And so they ask him to light up and take a puff, and then they say, all right, think about it. What are you tasting? What are you feeling? And especially in the taste, when they really, really think about it, they say, wow, this really tastes like shit. Why am I doing this? But you don't think, you just do, and you're not thinking about, all right, it's like, it really isn't that great. Why am I doing this? But my point is, when you begin, even whether it's yourself or your relationship, when you ask that why, when you start going a little bit deeper of, okay, what are you really feeling here? It begins to get you on the right path to ask the proper questions rather than just feeling the anger or fear or whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting because I talked a couple weeks ago with a spouse who lost her husband, who was a veteran. So he was in Afghanistan, and then he had seen some things as an officer, and ended up drinking himself to death. He actually, drank for 2.5 days and didn't wake up. And so I said, well, was he always a drinker? And she's like, no, it kind of came up. And I said, gosh, it's just so hard and she knows, and she was talking about this. I didn't just say this to her and be insensitive, but I just talked about how, if we'd known, if she'd known, that a lot of times drinking can be brought on by one thing. So you solve that one thing, and all of a sudden there's no more, they don't want to drink anymore. That's not for it. That's not all, but it's just, like a symptom,
right,
of something that is deeper. And for him, complete PTSD based on what she was talking about, and just never didn't want to get help, didn't want her to say anything. And yet, it killed him. Yeah. It killed him. And so, now she's got 3 little boys that she's raising by herself. So it's these types of things that we are dealing with How to Love Our Cops a lot. And we see this, and it wasn't intentional. He didn't mean to kill himself, but with alcohol, but it's just, there's a lot of hurting people. And she did not have any resources at her disposal when there's tons. So it's so hard. Each one of these situations that we see, whether it be suicide or an accidental death, or, just somebody, we've seen cops that'll actually commit a crime. They'll drive drunk, or, and then they're losing their jobs. And it's like, okay, now what? And it's directly related to not getting the help that they needed for their mind and for their soul. Because this job is very difficult on the mind and on the soul and on the spirit. I mean, and on the body. I mean, it's just hard. So How to Love Our Cops is really trying to proactively educate, spouses, but unfortunately, we're still doing a lot of response, like oh no, we're in this crisis mode. And we're like, okay, we're here. And let's educate you after the fact and get you, some resources that can help you. But it frustrates me that a lot of cop families, they don't care until things are bad.
Yeah.
And they'll be really bad. And yeah. So anyway, but we're trying to do it proactively as well as educate on the fly when people are in crisis.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't think it's just cop families.
No.
I think there's a lot of families. I think it's just, unfortunately, in some first responder relationships, it magnifies a little bit more. So as we begin to wind down here, you alluded to it a couple of times, the resources that How to Love Our Cops provides. Talk a little bit about, what you're actually doing. If there's, law enforcement spouse in Knoxville, Tennessee that, could use, is it in a decent marriage, but could just use a little help. Maybe it's community, maybe it's, a little bit of guidance or advice or so forth. What resources can you offer?
So we have three things. We have resources, we have programs, and then we have events. And they're all designed to educate and to equip, and encouragement. It's always based on positivity. So our programs, we basically have a peer support. So we have trained spouses who are, and officers actually, who are trained that can talk to people. So if you want, right now it's just through our website, but it's kind of a secret, but
don't tell anybody.
Yeah. I can tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. But,
that'd be all right too.
But we will be easier to access soon. Let's just put it that way. But right now through our website, and then, just at our events, and we do have trained peers who are, put under confidentiality. So somebody in Knoxville, Tennessee, if they didn't have someone to talk to about, and they're concerned about their spouse, or they're concerned about themselves, I can't do this much longer. I am overwhelmed. We understand. We've been there. And so we can, we offer that as one of our programs. We also do a lot of praying for, we call it the Pray for the Patch, which is we pray for departments and the patches that our officers are wearing on both sides of their arms. And then we also we help spouse groups. We come alongside of them and help them start, or help give them some of our resources, like our books. And we have starter kits for new officer families that we are about to launch. So that's coming out probably by the time this podcast comes out. It'll be on our website, where you can go to our website, howtoloveourcops.com. .org, and see what we have for new officer families. And then we also have a husband group. One of our programs is that, hey, our female officers, they have spouses too. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of male spouses and significants out there who just, a lot of the same issues, but they would prefer to talk to a guy. And so we do have on our core team, we have a male spouse who's been through a lot with his wife. And we have an Instagram that he's put together, and we put resources on that. And there's more that's just new. And so there will be more like events and things. And then also at our events, we have home watch conferences, which are for spouses at this point, working on some other couple things, things for couples, I should say, coming up. But but those spouse conferences were actually in Sacramento area, Boston, Baton Rouge, and
Oklahoma City. See, I remember.
Yes. Right in the middle, right in the middle. So you can go from anywhere. But so, and we've got great speakers, and we just love on spouses in every way possible. It's awesome. And people leave encouraged, and, gives them a shot in the arm for their relationship. And then our resources, we do have books, and we're starting with more videos, putting those together to educate. We have a blog on our website that is going to be turning into a vlog. So we're starting to go with more of the video piece with that. And yeah, I think that is it.
That's it?
I think for now. So we have a lot of ideas that are, that I can't talk about yet, but that we are always creating more resources. The other thing is, on our website, we have other resources. So people that we partner with, such as yourself, and then, groups that if we can't meet that need, then we know of other people who can. And we can also find culturally competent therapists. And we recommend EMDR or brain spotting therapies. And so we can find people, and with our connections and whatnot. So those are some of the things that we do. Book clubs, just different things that we've been doing here and there. So all designed to educate, to encourage, and to equip for the challenges that this career brings.
Yeah. So if you are that law enforcement spouse in Knoxville, Tennessee, first you should be a member of the Knoxville Law Enforcement Federal Credit Union, one of our proud POCOA credit unions. And if you have, emotional marriage issues, go to howtoloveourcops.org. One of my last questions is, in all of this, especially the home watch conferences and so forth, is you only deal with, quote, high level phrase, heavy shit. You don't have any fun or anything. There's never any laughter or any enjoyable parts of this, right? Yeah.
No, humor is one of the ways that we love. So yes. So lots of good stuff, but you'll laugh, you'll eat well, yes, there will be chocolate, all the things that our spouses need, just for a day of, almost like a spa day.
There you go. Well, if you ever need an MC to tell stupid jokes, I'm your guy. I can't promise that there'll be any laughter. So last question, and I think you pretty much already answered it. Yeah. How best to find a Vicki Newman and How to Love Our Cops out there?
Well, I am one of an amazing group of people. So we've got 17 actual people throughout the United States that are really, really awesome. So you can find us on howtoloveourcops.org, the number 2, not T-O, but 2, howtoloveourcops.org.
How to.
Yes,
number 2.
That's it right there.
But I think Google in its infinite wisdom would probably still steer you the right way. Vicki, I literally could talk to you for another hour, but you got stuff to do. I got stuff to do. Always fun and always insightful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Ken.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for what you do. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listen to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio, and we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association, And to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.